The year was 1867, and the frontier had a way of cutting a man down to his barest truth. Land stretched wider than the eye could hold, empty but for sagebrush, ridges of red stone, and the relentless wind that carried dust like a curse. Out here, law was a faraway rumor, and survival was an everyday negotiation between hunger, grit, and whatever god or devil chose to cross your path. Sam Carver lived alone at the edge of that land, a man whose name was barely known in town and not remembered kindly by the few who did. He'd left behind a wife in a graveyard 2 winters past, and a child's marker beside hers. Since then, he kept to himself, nursing cattle, patching fences, and drinking only enough to feel the edge of pain dull, but not disappear. He was a man stripped down to labor and silence, his words hoarded like bullets. That morning he'd ridden out earlier than usual, saddle creaking under his weight, the roan beneath him restless. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine from the higher ridges. He was looking for strays, though the truth was he welcomed the long rides. They kept him away from the cabin where shadows seemed thicker than light. The canyon he crossed had a way of swallowing sound. Rocks towered on both sides, streaked with sun and shadow. A hawk drifted above. Then, sudden and sharp, a cry cut through the stillness. It wasn't the call of an animal. It was human. A raw, desperate shout, half pain, half defiance, that froze Sam in the saddle. He spurred the roan forward, heart hammering. Rounding a bend, he saw it. A man crumpled against a boulder, arms flailing weakly, and over him a mountain lion, lean and furious, claws flashing. Dust rose in a choking cloud as the beast struck again, jaws closing on a sleeve, dragging its prey closer. Sam didn't think. He dropped from the saddle, rifle in hand. The shot would be near impossible. The beast and the man tangled together, dust blinding him, his pulse beating too loud in his ears. He steadied, squeezed. Click! The rifle jammed. A curse burned his throat. The lion turned, golden eyes locking on him. Then it lunged. He swung the rifle like a club. The stock cracked against the animal's ribs, but its weight drove him back. They went down in a whirl of teeth and fury, claws tearing through his coat. He grabbed for the knife at his belt, blade flashing in the sliver of sun. The beast's breath was hot, fetid with blood. Its roar was thunder in his skull. He drove the knife upward again and again, until the scream turned to a shudder, the body slackening heavy across him. For a long moment he lay still, chest heaving, dust thick in his mouth. The lion was dead, sprawled in the dirt, its eyes glassy. Sam shoved it aside and staggered to his feet, wiping blood, his or the animal's, off his face. His hands shook, but not from fear. Not yet. The man against the rock groaned. Sam knelt beside him. He was old, his hair gray as ash, his skin weathered and dark, lined deep by sun and years. Blood soaked his shoulder where claws had raked him. His eyes fluttered open, black and sharp despite the pain. Sam recognized him at once, not by name but by bearing. An elder. Apache. Sam felt the old reflex of dread tighten in his gut. White men and Apache met most often with rifles in between. He should have ridden on, should never have stopped. But the sight of those wounds, the rasp of the old man's breath, it cut against something in him that hadn't yet died. Easy, Sam muttered, tearing a strip from his own shirt. You'll bleed out if I don't stop this. The elder did not fight him, though his gaze never wavered, sharp even as his strength failed. Sam pressed cloth to the wound, bound it tight, tied it off with hands still raw from the fight. The elder winced, but said nothing. When it was done, Sam leaned back, staring at the blood on his fingers. It pulled at memory, unwanted and merciless, his wife coughing crimson in their cabin bed, his child burning with fever, and him helpless, just as helpless as now. Only this time he had done something. He had kept a man breathing. The elder tried to speak, words rough and broken. Sam didn't understand, but he shook his head. Save it. You're not done yet. The canyon was no place to linger. Coyotes would come for the lion, maybe worse. Sam hauled the man up, half carrying, half dragging him to the horse. The roan snorted, uneasy at the scent of blood, but stood firm as Sam lifted the elder across the saddle. He mounted behind, one arm bracing the man upright. They rode slow, the elder sagging against him. The sun climbed higher, burning hot. Sweat stung his eyes. His ribs ached where claws had grazed him. Every mile was a question. What if they were seen? If Apache riders found him with their wounded elder, no story would save him. A single arrow through the heart, and he'd be another nameless fool in the dust. More than once he thought of leaving the man at a safe patch of shade, letting the tribe find him. But each time he pressed on. He had made his choice when he lifted the man from the canyon floor. A man either carried through, or he wasn't worth calling a man at all. By late afternoon, the ridges thinned, giving way to open ground. The elder stirred once, eyes half-lidded, muttering words Sam couldn't catch. Sam felt the weight of them anyway, heavy as judgment. He kept his eyes scanning the horizon. He saw hoof prints fresh in the dust, a feather snagged on a bush, a broken arrow shaft glinting. He knew they were being watched. The cabin came into view just as dusk bled into the sky. Weathered logs, a lean-to for cattle, smoke barely rising from the chimney where he hadn't lit fire in days. He slid down, easing the elder onto the ground, then half-carried him inside, laying him on the narrow cot. He poured water, lifted it to cracked lips. The elder drank a little, then closed his eyes, chest rising shallow but steady. Sam sat back hard, exhaustion rolling through him. His knuckles were torn, his coat shredded, his body one long bruise. Yet there was something in the stillness of the room that felt different than the silence he'd known for 2 years. Another heartbeat, another presence. It was almost unbearable. Outside, the sky deepened, stars pricking the darkness. Sam patched his own ribs, cleaned his knife, fed the fire. He should have felt relief, but instead unease gnawed at him. He stepped onto the porch, looking out across the land. The wind had dropped. The night was too still. Then he heard it, distant at first, rolling low across the plain. A drumbeat, then another. Slow, rhythmic, carried on the air like a heartbeat not his own. Sam froze, every muscle locked. He knew the sound. It wasn't for celebration. It was a summons, an answer, a warning. 50 riders, maybe more, were out there beneath the stars. Watching, waiting. He stood with the night pressing close around him, the firelight flickering against the cabin wall. Behind him, the elder breathed shallow, a life he had saved and a danger he had brought into his home. Ahead, the drums grew louder, closer, and Sam Carver, who thought he had nothing left to lose, realized the fight with the mountain lion had only been the first step into a storm that might finish him. Dawn came slow, pale light spilling over the plains like water across stone. Sam Carver hadn't slept. He'd spent the long hours at the cabin window, listening to the night breathe, every muscle taut with waiting. The elder lay on the cot, still alive, though his breaths rasped like wind through dry reeds. Sam had cleaned the wounds again, bound them tighter, but there was little more he could do. The rest would be left to the man's own grit, and perhaps whatever gods he prayed to. When the first streak of sun touched the horizon, Sam heard it. Hooves. Not one, not a handful. Dozens. The sound rolled like thunder, shaking the ground beneath him. He stepped out onto the porch, rifle in hand, though he knew the gesture was a fool's comfort. A man against 50 was nothing but meat waiting to be claimed. They came over the rise, row after row, horses sleek and strong, riders upright and silent. The sun caught the points of their lances, the metal of their rifles, the feathers bound in their hair. Their faces were painted, stern as stone, eyes fixed on him with no hint of mercy. They did not shout. They did not rush. They came with the patience of a storm, sure as the tide, until they circled the cabin in a wide ring, dust rising around him. Sam stood tall on the porch, rifle lowered but not set aside. His throat was dry, his palms damp. He had faced wild beasts, sickness, grief that hollowed a man out from the inside. But this was something else. He had stepped into a story larger than himself, and it was too late to step back out. One rider dismounted. He was taller than most, broad in the shoulders, with a hawk feather tied into his braid and a necklace of bone resting against his chest. His gaze was cold, unreadable, but it carried the weight of command. This was no ordinary warrior. This was the one they followed. The man spoke, his words sharp, steady, the Apache tongue flowing like stone rolling in water. Sam caught none of it. His ignorance felt like a noose tightening. Another rider, younger, with quick eyes, stepped forward. He spoke in broken English, the words heavy but clear. "You white man, why you take elder? Why he in your house?" Sam shifted his grip on the rifle, careful not to raise it. "Mountain lion. Attacked him in the canyon. I pulled him out. He'd be dead if I hadn't." The words fell flat in the dust. The young interpreter's mouth pressed thin. He relayed Sam's answer to the chief, voice quick. Murmurs rose in the circle. Hands tightened on spears. A few horses stamped, snorted, restless with the air of violence. The elder stirred inside, a hoarse cough breaking the tension. The sound drew eyes toward the open doorway. At a sharp command, two riders dismounted, pushed past Sam, and entered. Sam's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. To stop them now was to end his life where he stood. The cabin was small. The elder lay on the cot, pale with blood loss, but alive. He opened his eyes as the warriors knelt beside him. One spoke, rapid, urgent words. The elder answered with what strength he had, voice weak but sure. His hand lifted, trembling, pointing toward the porch where Sam stood. The warriors rose, exchanged looks, then stepped outside. A silence hung heavy. The elder's words carried weight. Sam could feel it, even if he didn't know the meaning. The young interpreter spoke again. "Elders say you kill lion. You save his life." Sam gave a curt nod. "That's the truth." The chief studied him a long time. The circle of riders seemed to lean inward, waiting. Finally, the chief dismounted fully, stepping forward until he stood a few paces away. His shadow stretched across the porch. He spoke in a deep voice, low and resonant, each word measured like the strike of a drum. The interpreter swallowed, then translated. "Chief say man who save elder, no enemy today." Relief washed through Sam, but only partway. Not enemy today, meant tomorrow was still a question. The chief turned, barked an order. Riders dismounted, approaching the cabin. Sam stiffened, but instead of drawing weapons, they carried bundles. One laid down a haunch of venison, still fresh. Another placed a blanket, thick and woven with red and black. Another set a carved wooden bowl on the step. One by one, they left offerings until the porch bore the weight of their gratitude. Sam stared, throat tight. Gifts were not something he had seen in a long time. Kindness had been buried with his family. He didn't know how to hold it, let alone return it. The interpreter spoke again. "They give you honor. Elder's life is worth much. They give thanks." Sam nodded, though his chest burned with a mix of humility and unease. "Tell them, I did what any man ought to. Nothing more." The words were translated. Some of the riders looked at him differently after that, not softened exactly, but with a flicker of something like respect. The elder's survival was no small thing, but peace was fragile. Sam knew it. The chief knew it. A single spark could turn thanks into blood. The spark came sooner than either expected. A rider galloped in from the east, dust trailing behind him. He shouted in Apache, voice urgent, words tumbling too fast for Sam to catch. The chief's expression darkened. The warriors stiffened, some gripping weapons tight. The interpreter spoke, quickly. "White men, raiders, coming. They want fight. They want drive Apache out." Sam's gut twisted. He knew the type. Men from town or the far edges, drunk on hate, armed with cheap rifles and greed. They didn't care about land or treaty. They wanted cattle, scalps, or simply the thrill of killing. The interpreter's eyes narrowed at Sam. "They say you with them, or you with us?" Sam felt the weight of the question. He had spent years alone, owing nothing to no one. But now, with the elder inside his cabin, with 50 warriors circling his land, neutrality was gone. He was bound to the choice whether he liked it or not. His voice came out low, steady. "I ain't with raiders. Never was, never will be." The interpreter passed his words along. The chief studied him, then gave a single nod. It wasn't trust, Not yet, but it was recognition. The warriors began to move with purpose. Horses were readied, weapons checked, eyes sharp on the horizon. The drumbeat of hooves earlier had been a warning. Now it would become a shield. Sam felt the pull of decision. He could stay in the cabin, hope the raiders passed him by, but he knew better. The cabin was small, wood dry, easy to burn. If the raiders came and saw Apache gathered here, they'd torch the place without a thought. Elder warriors Sam, all ash. He walked back inside. The elder's eyes opened, fixed on him. They were weak, but burning still. Sam sat at the edge of the cot, leaned close. Looks like trouble's coming. Don't know if I'll see tomorrow, but I reckon saving you is worth it. The elder said nothing, only lifted a trembling hand. His fingers brushed Sam's arm, light but steady as a blessing. Sam stood, grabbed his rifle, checked the chamber. He strapped on the revolver he hadn't worn in months. The weight felt strange, like an old ghost pressing against his hip. He stepped back onto the porch. The warriors were mounted now, a line stretching across the plain. The chief raised his hand, signaling silence. All eyes turned east. The horizon shimmered with heat and dust. Shapes emerged. Horses, riders, 15, maybe 20, white men, their laughter carrying harsh on the morning air, rifles slung careless, bandanas masking faces. Sam's jaw tightened. He knew what was coming. The raiders would not stop to talk. They would kill, loot, burn, and he was caught in the middle, but no longer a man who could pretend the middle was enough. The chief gave a short, sharp cry. The warriors answered as one, the sound rising fierce, echoing across the land like the voice of the earth itself. Horses stamped, ready, spears lowered, rifles lifted. Sam stepped down from porch, boots crunching on hard ground. He joined the line, his roan brought to him by a silent rider. He mounted, rifle balanced across the saddle, heart steady now. He had saved one life. That choice had bound him to the lives of many. And as the raiders drew closer, dust rising like a storm at their backs, Sam Carver understood there was no turning away. The wind carried the smell of sweat, gunpowder, fear. He gripped the reins tighter, eyes fixed on the men riding toward them. The line of warriors shifted, waiting for the first crack of a shot to break the world open. Sam's finger rested against the trigger. His breath came slow. Even whatever came next, he was no longer just a man hiding from his past. He was a man standing in it, rifle in hand, with 50 warriors at his side. And the storm was almost here. The sun had slipped behind the ridgeline, leaving the valley in a copper gloom, when the rancher first caught the distant clamor of hooves. It wasn't the soft shuffle of riders heading home, nor the lonely drift of a stray Mustang. This was heavier, faster, purposeful. He straightened from the water trough, rifle still leaning against the porch rail, and squinted into the failing light. Out there, beyond the mesquite, dust climbed toward the heavens. Trouble had come quicker than he expected. Inside, the elder lay on a pallet, his breath shallow but steady. The bandages, though crude, held the bleeding at bay. He had stirred once during the afternoon, muttering words in his tongue, and the rancher had answered, though he knew the man couldn't understand, "Don't worry. I've carried worse burdens." But now, with the rising thunder of hooves, the rancher felt that vow snapping taut. The warriors had warned him. There were men, white men, who wanted the valley cleared. They saw the land as grazing ground and the Apaches as vermin. He had dismissed it at first, but the smoke on the northern horizon told its own tale. Cattle raiders, land grabbers, drifters looking to spill blood for coin. He spat into the dirt. They'd picked a poor evening to come. The riders broke from the trees soon after, a ragged band with rifles across their saddles and bandanas hiding their grins. 15 at least, maybe more. They slowed at the sight of the cabin, circling like wolves. One called out, "Evenin', stranger. Looks like you've got company that don't belong." The rancher's hand fell on his rifle. He kept his voice flat. "This land don't belong to you either." A laugh went up, harsh and mocking. "You been playing nurse to redskins? That's a poor way to die." Before he could answer, a sharp whistle split the dusk. From the trees behind the cabin, shadows on horseback surged forth. Apache riders, near 50 strong, the same men who had stood at dawn outside his door. Now they rode with lances high, feathers whipping, eyes set on the intruders. For a heartbeat, the plain froze under the weight of two forces staring each other down. The rancher felt the pull of the moment. He could step aside, let them settle their old scores, or he could choose, once more, to stand where he was not welcome. His rifle came up slowly, deliberate. "If you're here for blood," he called, "you'll have to spill mine first." The lead raider spat into the dirt, snarling. "Then it'll be easy." The valley erupted. Gunfire cracked, like splitting timber. Horses screamed. Dust rose thick, turning men into shadows. The rancher fired once, twice, and saw a raider tumble from the saddle, arms flailing. He ducked back toward the cabin as bullets chewed into the porch posts. The elder's life flickered behind those thin walls, and he meant to guard it. Apache war cries split the night. The warriors wheeled in wide arcs, rifles flashing, arrows hissing through the gloom. One rider leapt from his horse, tackling a raider to the ground, blade flashing in the chaos. The air stank of powder, sweat, and iron. The rancher fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. His rifle barked until empty, then he drew his Colt, teeth gritted, vision red. A raider charged at him, revolver in hand, and the two crashed together in the dust, rolling, clawing. The raider's breath was sour with whiskey. His blade scraped the rancher's cheek before the Colt thundered point-blank, leaving silence where a man had been. He staggered, upright, chest heaving. The battle surged all around, but in that moment he glimpsed the elder's fragile form through the cabin doorway. A raider had broken off, creeping for the shelter, pistol raised. "No," the rancher growled. He sprinted, shoving through smoke and bodies, and hurled himself across the elder just as the pistol flared. The ball tore into his shoulder, spinning him against the wall. Pain lanced hot and deep, but he fired back with his good arm. The raider crumpled in the doorway, eyes wide, gun slipping from his grasp. The elder stirred beneath him, eyes fluttering open, and for the first time the rancher thought he saw recognition, perhaps even trust. He tried to speak, but the battle swallowed the moment whole. Outside, the tide was turning. The Apaches fought with ferocity, outnumbering and outmaneuvering the raiders. Horses bolted riderless, and bodies lay sprawled in the dust. Still, the raiders pressed hard, driven by greed more than courage. The rancher pushed himself upright, shoulder screaming, and staggered back into the yard. He reloaded with clumsy hands, each cartridge a battle against his own trembling fingers. A young Apache warrior darted past him, bow drawn, and let an arrow fly that sank deep into a raider's chest. The youth glanced back, eyes fierce, and nodded once in thanks before disappearing again into the melee. It struck the rancher then, he wasn't fighting alone. For years he had carried the weight of solitude, building walls around his grief, convincing himself no man or tribe had a place beside him. But here, in the blood and fire of the valley, he stood shoulder to shoulder with men who had once been his fear, and for the first time, he felt something stir beyond survival. He felt belonging. The raiders broke finally, scattering into the night, with curses trailing behind. Some limped on foot, others spurred their horses hard, leaving their dead where they fell. The silence that followed was jagged, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the restless snorts of horses. The rancher dropped to his knees, breath ragged, pistol limp in his hand. Blood soaked his shirt, sticky and hot, but he was alive. Around him, Apache warriors gathered, their chief at the front, face painted in ash and ochre. The chief studied him long, saying nothing. Then he dismounted and strode forward, offering his hand. The gesture was heavy with meaning, the kind no words could carry. The rancher hesitated, then clasped it. Their grip was firm, binding, and in that moment, a wall that had stood for generations cracked. The elder was carried out then, lifted carefully by two warriors. His eyes, though weak, found the rancher's, and a faint smile touched his weathered face. He spoke a few words in his tongue, and the chief translated. He says, "You are brother now." The rancher felt his throat tighten. He looked down at his bloodied hands, at the talisman the elder pressed into his palm, a small carved bone smoothed by time. He had set out only to save a single life. But tonight, he realized that life had turned and saved his own. The warriors prepared to leave, their wounded slung gently across saddles, their dead honored with quiet prayer. The chief mounted again, raising his hand in farewell. The rancher stood in the ruin of his yard, body aching, soul raw, watching them ride into the horizon where dawn's first light bled gold. Alone once more, he held the talisman tight and whispered into the wind, "Maybe I ain't so alone after all." And as the sun climbed, scattering the shadows, he knew the valley would remember this night, not for the blood spilled, but for the bond forged in its fire.